Good morning and happy Easter, wherever you're watching from, whether it's Tamworth, Rookangeary or Rankin Park. It's lovely to be with you this Easter morning.
Yes, it is. Christ is risen. He's risen indeed. Jen's going to read to us just a very short reading from John 20, and then we'll reflect.
Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance.
The opening words of this chapter are a surprise, even if our Easter traditions mean the surprise is somewhat lost on us. Given all the talk of Jesus rising after 3 days, we would have expected John's Easter story to begin on the 3rd day, but it begins on the 1st day. We're meant, I think, to remember the opening words of John's Gospel, which are themselves an echo of the opening of the whole Bible story. In the beginning, Genesis 1 verse 1, John 1 verse 1. John is telling the story of creation and recreation. The story of creation begins in darkness, and then on the 1st day, God created light. John's Easter story likewise begins in darkness. While it was still dark, he says in 20 verse 1. It echoes 13 verse 30 when, as Judas left to begin the process that ended in Jesus' crucifixion, we read, "And it was night." 3 days have passed since then, but spiritually we're still in darkness. But everything is about to burst into light. Just as in the story of creation, light replaces darkness on the 1st day, so in the story of new creation, light is going to replace darkness on the 1st day. Mary thinks Jesus is the gardener. It's clearly a mistake, but perhaps John points to a bigger truth. God gave Adam a garden to tend and extend. Yet humanity rebelled against God and brought a curse upon creation. But here is Jesus, the new Adam, humanity made new, ready to restore creation. The 5th century theologian Jerome says, "When Mary Magdalene had seen the Lord and thought that he was the gardener, she was mistaken, indeed, in her vision, but the very error had its prototype, that is, had an element of truth. Truly, indeed, Jesus was the gardener of his paradise, of his trees of paradise." This is probably also how we should read 20 verse 22. "And with that he breathed on them and said, 'Receive the Holy Spirit.'" It seems to be a symbolic act that looks forward to Pentecost, but it also recalls the creation of humanity, when God breathed his Spirit into an inert clay form and created a living soul, Genesis 2 verse 7. Jesus is recreating humanity, breathing new life by his Spirit. So it's significant that the story ends with the words, "These are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name," John 20 verse 31. How did God create? Through his word. How does God recreate? Through his word. This too is how we should read verse 23. "If you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven." The message of Easter is preached by God's people. Those who receive that message are forgiven. Those who reject that message are not forgiven. That's the message that comes to you now, the promise of forgiveness and life by believing in Jesus. If, along with Thomas, you say to him, "My Lord and my God," then today you stand as part of a recreated eternal humanity, and this surely is the reason to have a very happy Easter. I'm going to ask Jen to read a meditation from Colossians 1 just to finish.
The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks for joining us for these Easter devotions over the last couple of weeks from Tim Chester's Glory of the Cross. We look forward to doing another set of devotions starting tomorrow with you as well. Please join us then. Thank you.
Thanks. See you then.